When you think about a baby being born, it's usually this moment of just pure joy, right? But what happens when things don't go exactly to plan? Well, that's when this incredible, highly coordinated process kicks in during those first critical minutes. So today, we're going to break down that science-backed, systematic approach that ensures every newborn gets the best possible start.
All right, I want to start with just one number, 90%.
So what does that mean? It means the vast majority of newborns, they come into the world, they take that first breath, and they need zero medical help. It's a really powerful reminder. Birth is, for the most part, a totally smooth, natural process. But of course, that leaves this other group, roughly 1 in 10 newborns. They might need a little bit of help to get their breathing going. And here's the crucial part. For that 10%, it is not a moment of panic. It's a moment of absolute precision. There's this incredibly well-rehearsed plan, a script that medical teams follow to the letter, all based on decades of solid research. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into. Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the big picture, then we'll zoom in on those immediate first steps. After that, we'll focus on the single most important action, which is ventilation, before we touch on the rarer, more advanced measures. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at the journey to recovery. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the big picture. See, modern neonatal care isn't just about what happens in that split second of birth. It's actually guided by this really important concept called the newborn chain of care. The best way to think about it is like a protective bubble of care. It actually starts forming way before labor even begins, with risk assessments during pregnancy, and it continues long after, with postnatal recovery. It's a whole system, from start to finish, designed to make sure not a single detail is missed, all for the best possible outcome. And if you look at these steps, you can see how each one links directly to the next. It really is like a well-rehearsed play. So step 1, prevention, that's happening during pregnancy. If risks are flagged, then step 2, recognition and team activation, kicks in, getting the right people in the room before the baby's even born. Then come the immediate actions, ventilation, and so on down the line. Every single link in this chain is strong, it's planned, and it's ready to go. Okay, so with that big framework in our minds, let's zoom in on Section 2, the all-important first steps. These are the immediate actions that really set the stage for a healthy transition. And as you're about to see, some of the thinking here has changed a lot. Okay, a perfect example of this change is how we manage the umbilical cord. For decades, for a long time, the standard was clamp and cut, almost instantly. But the new guidelines, they recommend waiting, at least 60 seconds for most babies. And you might be asking, why? Well, that single extra minute allows this huge volume of beneficial iron-rich blood to transfer from the placenta to the baby. We're talking better blood counts, better iron stores for months. It's a really simple change with a massive impact. All right, another absolutely critical first step is temperature control. You have to remember, a newborn is wet from birth, and they have a huge amount of skin compared to their body weight, so they can lose heat incredibly fast. And falling even a little bit below that target range you see here, well, that's linked to all sorts of bad outcomes. So what do? For healthy babies, it's simple. Immediate skin-to-skin contact with a parent. It's the best warmer there is, period. And for babies who need a little more help, we use simple but effective tools like radiant warmers or even just plastic wraps to keep that vital warmth locked in. Okay, now we get to the absolute heart of neonatal resuscitation. When a baby is struggling to breathe, what is the single most important thing the medical team can do? It all comes down to one single action. And the guidelines could not be more clear on this point. Look at this quote. Effective ventilation of the lungs is the priority. Forget chest compressions for a second. Forget medication. The #1 focus is on one thing, helping that baby's lungs inflate with air for the very first time. This is the action that can turn everything around. So the big question is, how does the team know it's actually working? Well, it's not as complicated as you might think. They are laser-focused on one key signal, a rising heart rate. See, as those lungs successfully fill with air, the heart rate starts to climb. It's the most reliable, most immediate sign that the baby is responding, and their whole system is kicking into gear. Now, in some pretty rare cases, ventilation alone isn't quite enough, and that's when the team moves on to the advanced measures. But I want to stress this again. This isn't some frantic scramble. It is a calm, systematic escalation of care. They're just following a very clear algorithm.
This timeline here really shows that step-by-step safety net in action. And notice the clock is always ticking. So they've been doing effective ventilation for 30 seconds. If the heart rate is still below 60, boom, they add chest compressions. Then, if after another full minute of top-notch compressions and breathing support, the heart rate still hasn't come up, only then is a dose of epinephrine given. It is a super precise, time-sensitive escalation.
So, you might be wondering, how often does this actually happen? How often are these advanced measures even needed? Well, the number might really surprise you. It's less than 1%. That's right, incredibly rare. So while the teams are, of course, expertly trained for this exact scenario, the reality is that for almost every baby who needs a little help, just getting that effective ventilation going is all it takes. And that brings us to our final section, because after those first few critical minutes, the journey isn't over. The care continues with really close monitoring just to make sure that baby has a nice, stable transition to life outside the womb. So let's boil this all down. What are the big take-home messages here? I think there are 4 things that really stand out. First, preparation is absolutely everything. Teams are planning for this before every single birth. Second, ventilation is king. It is the #1 priority. Third, the heart rate is your guide. A rising heart rate tells you you're on the right track. And finally, and this is probably the most reassuring point of all, the vast majority of babies are totally fine all on their own. You know, when you step back and look at this whole system, from the planning before birth to the care after, it's just a remarkable story. It's a story of science guiding what we do, of meticulous preparation, and of expert teams working together just seamlessly, even under intense pressure. Which kind of leaves us with one final thought. Because this whole thing, it isn't just a medical protocol, it's really a statement. When we have a system that is this detailed, this practiced, and this scientifically grounded, all designed to manage just the first 5 minutes of a life, what does that tell you? What does that reveal about our collective commitment to giving every single child the absolute best possible start in life?